So, lone rider here, out on my single speed, and I guess out here in the woods is as good a place as any to talk about one of my new faves. Except it's not really new; it's kind of old. This is the Spyderco Delica Wharncliffe version, and this has a lot of benefits to it. Pretty much many of the same as the Delica. It's no frills. It's slim, it's lightweight, it's strong, has enough blade for your purpose, but it's not too big to be cumbersome or frightening to sheep. I hate using the word sheep, but it's just so appropriate sometimes, right? But it also has some additional benefits because of the Wharncliffe blade, and it also has a sort of an interesting history, which I think is neat. This was designed, basically mocked up by somebody on one of the internet forums, and Spyderco actually listened to this fan, to this consumer, and they actually made a production knife based on his design, which I think is pretty neat. I wish more companies in more industries would do that sort of thing, because the end user ultimately is the people who design these things aren't stupid. They usually know what they're doing, and so on and so forth. And in some ways saying, listen to the customer, and, in that sense, would be like, okay, when your soccer mom tells you how to design a minivan, like, should you really listen to her engineering advice? Maybe. But when the consumer or the fan or the end user actually does know what they're about and has a good design, it's really nice when the companies listen. And I wish, wish more companies did that on occasion when it's warranted by the quality of the design. Obviously, not everything everybody comes up with is going to be a good idea, but in this case, it clearly was. And I think that's just a neat little bit of history about this knife, that it was actually designed by a regular Joe, by a regular customer like you or me or anyone else, and the company began manufacturing it. It's now a standard model. It's not like they just did a limited edition of 100 or 1,000 or whatever. This is a standard production model now. And I think that's pretty neat. And we have a customer, to thank for it, but we also have the fact that the Spyderco Corporation listened to the customer, which is pretty cool. So just a little bit about the history there. So what this is essentially is a Delica with a Wharncliffe style blade. For those who aren't familiar with it, the Wharncliffe is a blade that has a flat edge and basically no belly. The edge is completely flat and usually a curved back. It's sometimes confused with the sheep's foot blade because that's often very similar. The difference is the sheep's foot doesn't really have that much of a point. It's more squared or rounded off. The Wharncliffe has a point, but it's a very strong point because it's usually supported by this curved back. And then, of course, no belly to the blade means it has some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantages are usually found when it comes to things like, let me see here. Fortunately, there's no big sticks handy right now, but that's what comes from, parking my bike in the middle of a grassland. Oh wait, there's one over there. Hold on. Okay, so its advantages are usually found when it comes to cutting wood, things like that. You can use the entire length of the blade for long stroke. What I found it's particularly useful for are things where you're doing essentially woodworking. For example, in my case, I was rehilting a practice sword, and the handle scales didn't quite fit, and I just needed to trim a little bit off on the bottom so it would fit into this bolster. And I wanted to be able to do it without completely taking the thing apart, which meant if I used a blade with a belly, the curve would keep it from, I'd have to go like this to get it to cut completely flat at the bottom. With this, I could just go straight down and boom, and because what it was going to be bottoming out against was flat. So the blade matched, it worked fine. So it's great for woodworking tasks. It's great as a utility knife, opening boxes and things like that, push and pull cuts. And you know, anywhere you're going to be cutting wood, this long edge just excels. You know, it's basically like a one-handed draw knife in that sense, and it's just very effective. And it's very well designed for what it does. Now, for things where you're going to need a belly, obviously this isn't the blade profile for you. But what I think is interesting is that, I mean, you know, the standard Spyderco Delica has belly on the blade. So the question becomes, you know, that's already covered. But what if somebody wanted a knife that's more suited to whittling, more suited to woodworking, more suited to whatever? Well, that's where this comes in. And I think it's really cool that Spyderco listened to a customer and came up with a whole new production knife. I think it's really cool that they offer a Wharncliffe. The Wharncliffe has long been a favorite design in traditional pocket knives. It's nice to see a Spyderco version. This is definitely a useful little thing. It's also about the same price as your regular Delica, sometimes a little cheaper depending on where you get it. And like I said, it has all the advantages of the Delica. It's slim, it's lightweight, it's, you know, got a long enough blade to do most tasks, but short enough that it's not going to scare people or be cumbersome to carry. Yeah, it's an all-around great little thing. This particular one, that clip's not original. That came off, I believe, one of Spyderco's bird knives. I tried to modify the clip that was on this, and I kind of ruined it, so I put that on, and you'll notice it only has 2 screws. The screw on one of my other knives was stripped, so I had to use it for that. So there's only 2 screws holding this on, but it actually it wasn't the screw on this knife that was stripped. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, I ended up with not enough screws for all the knives, so this one only has 2. But basically, as long as they're in the 2 parallel holes and not cockeyed, like one here and one on the end, as long as they're the 2 ones that are like this, 2 is fine. Most aftermarket low profile or low carry clips actually only have 2 holes, even when they're designed for something with 3 screws like the Spyderco's. So yeah, that's that. And it's like I said, it's a neat little thing. I'm really glad Spyderco listened to the customers, and just a neat little version of a classic. So if you think this might be for you, pick one up. If you've never had a Wharncliffe blade, I guarantee you're going to like it. So there we go. Lone Rider out.